Hey y'all, it's Bethany here. Welcome back to my channel, Bethany Brings Books. I'm so excited to be doing a video today. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and it's my wrap up, but I've read so many great books and just haven't had a chance to really talk about them yet. So I've been super excited to get this video done and put out there. Let's go ahead and get started talking about what I've been reading lately. So I had a really good reading month in January. I really tried to be very intentional about what I read. I had one buddy read, and I had a list of books that I really wanted to get to in kind of like a TBR. And I was very intentional about trying to read those books, so I did pretty well with that. First of all, let's just talk about this study that I've been doing, Christ in All of Scripture. I am currently on week 7. I'm really enjoying it. So let me just show y'all what week 7 looks like so y'all can kind of get an idea. And I will say this week is probably the first week that I have actually done each study on the day it was supposed to be done. Most of the weeks, there's been some weeks that I honestly didn't do hardly any of the study until the weekend. And my goal from here on out is to be very intentional about doing this every day. Thank the Lord, this week He's really helped me, and I've been intentional about trying to do this in the morning, getting up a little bit earlier so I can have time to do this. A blessing to me this week, and it's just helped me keep my mind on the Lord even more throughout the week. So it tells you what the introduction, what your week is going to be about, and it says this week we will look at Judah, one of Jacob's 12 sons, and the expectation of a future ruler who would come from Judah's family. An expectation fulfilled in Jesus. By looking at how Jesus is this ruler, we can be encouraged that all injustices will one day be made right, and we can trust in Jesus when life feels out of control. This week we read from Genesis and Revelation. The first passage was from Jacob, when Jacob blessed his children when he was dying, and he gave each of them a blessing. So right here we have the passage that we read, and we can annotate and then answer some different questions. So that's the first day. Then the second day was to go a little bit deeper into that first passage. So they would kind of go into more detail, give you more other parts of scripture to read, and also have a little bit more commentary. And it just kind of connects different things together, and this was kind of talking about Judah. He was the one that persuaded his brothers to sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites. But then years later, we see Judah has had some kind of transformation in his life when they are in Egypt. They are before Joseph, but they don't know it's Joseph. And he offers himself in behalf of his brother Benjamin, because he says it would just, if they go back home without Benjamin, it would kill their father. And so he offers himself as a slave instead of Benjamin. And so it was just interesting to think about that concept, that Judah really had some kind of a transformation in his life, and something that changed him over all those years and changed his heart, made him more compassionate and loving toward his family and his father. And then day 3, we read from Revelation 5:5, which talks about how there is a lion from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, who is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. And this kind of goes back to connecting the passage about where Jacob blessed Jacob blessed Judah, called him a lion, compared him to a lion, and said that he would, someone would always be, or a ruler would always be in his household. Just making that connection between the prophecy that was given to Judah and it being fulfilled in Christ. Of course, the next day, day 4, we take that passage and kind of go deeper with it, make the connection. They make the connection between both passages. And then day 5 today is kind of just, it goes into, you read both of them again, and then it asks questions and kind of challenges you to look at different ways to how you handle these circumstances in your life. This week it was particularly talking about how can we trust God when things feel out of control, and know that in the end, Jesus is going to make everything right. One day, Jesus is going to make all the wrong right, which is such a consolation in life when we are struggling with wondering why, the questions why. I remember back over the holiday season, we lost a sweet, sweet friend at our church, a young lady who was my age, and she passed away a few weeks before Christmas, and it was a really hard loss for our church. I was doing my Advent study during that time, and just the focus kept pointing back to Christ and how one day Christ is going to return and he's going to make everything right again. And that hope and that consolation that we have even now, you know, then as we question why this happened to her and why she passed away and left a husband and a little boy behind, that was such a consolation to me. And I thought about that again today as I read that hope that we have, that when there's heartache in our life and there's questions and we don't understand why, we have a hope and we know that one day Christ is going to return. And the questions that we have, the confusion, it won't be there anymore. We'll just have that peace in knowing that Christ, and being one with him and the Father, and knowing that he has made everything right and he has it all in his hands. And so I am enjoying this, guys, really enjoying it. And y'all just help me pray that I'll be more intentional. That's my goal in the next few weeks, to be more intentional in as I'm working on it every day. I also read the Song of Solomon, which is so beautiful. I really enjoyed reading it. It would be a beautiful book to study with your spouse. Just a beautiful book. Now let's get into what I've been reading. A couple of things that I've already talked about that I read. I read The Burning of Rosemont Abbey by Naomi Stevens. I have a book review talking about that book, as well as The Dreams We Knew by Rachel Scott McDaniel. I have a book review that if I remember, I'll try to put in the description box, where I talked about both of those books together. Loved them. Phenomenal 5-star reads. They were amazing, amazing books. Like, so good. I read a lot of 5-star reads. So then I finished The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. Y'all, I talked about this, how I was like halfway finished with this in my last video, or in my last reading update. I finished this and it was so good. This is one of those books that will really just sit with me. The longer that I've sat with it, it's just really stuck with me. Really good. Really good. I loved this. It was very long, so I gave it 4.5. I might have said 5 stars, but I gave it 4.5 stars. I dropped it just a little bit because of the length. I feel like I could, for my enjoyment, I really could give it 5 stars. But while I was reading it, it did feel like it got long-winded at times. There were times that it was so long that there were times I forgot some of the details. Like, I would get to other aspects of the story and I would be like forgetting some of the details. And so that was my complaint. But, and there was a couple of times it slowed down a little bit, but then it would pick back up. But it was so good. I love Wilkie Collins' writing style. He's very readable. I would recommend him if you want to get started in classic literature and reading classics. I don't know if I'd recommend this one first because it is so long. It's like over 600 pages, so it's really long. But I would say for readability, I feel like his writing style is very readable. This book was so atmospheric. We're following the story of this young art teacher, and it's set in the 1800s, 1850s, I think. And he ends up with this assignment to go to this estate and teach these young ladies, be their art teacher, and also try to restore some of the artwork there. Or he's getting prepared to go there. One night he's walking home. Suddenly he feels something touch his arm, and he turns around and there's a woman standing there in all white, and it startles him. And he's like shocked, and so he's trying to figure out who this is, and like he's trying to help her out and see, because she seems very scared. And anyway, after he helps her get a carriage, and she like gets in the carriage and leaves, someone comes riding by and they see a police officer, and so they're asking the police officer, have you seen this woman? She's escaped from wearing all white, she's escaped from my asylum. And so now he's like, this is weird, what's going on here? All of this ends up being connected to journey he's about to partake in. The story goes from there, and it's all connected. and it's very atmospheric. There were times it felt like I was in the story right there. Just really atmospheric. Loved it. The characters, my favorite character from this book actually ended up being Marion, which is the two young ladies that he goes. One of them is Laura. Is it Laura? The other one is Marion. And Marion, this book really to me becomes about Marion. She's such a very strong, compassionate character, and she loves Laura so much. And we see that. If you like stories with like sisterly bond and affection, then this story has that. Marion and Laura just have a really strong connection, and Marion is very compassionate and loving and takes care of Laura. It's hard to talk about a lot in this because spoilers, but it was really good. I really enjoyed it. And there's a man in this book named Count Fosco, and let's just say Count Fosco, there's some sections in here where he was so creepy. And I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say, you know, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy in here. And there's multiple characters that are not great, and there's multiple characters that are good. And so I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just going to say that there are some passages with Count Fosco where he totally creeped me out. And I was like, okay, creepy. But yes, loved this very much. Like, really loved it. Cannot wait to read another Wilkie Collins. I wanted to immediately pick one up after I read this. Like, I want to read everything Wilkie Collins has written. I can't wait. I actually also started watching the movie adaptation of this. There's a I want to say 2017 edition or version. I watched a few episodes of it, like the first two, and it was interesting. I don't know, like, I can't say what the content is for the whole thing because I haven't finished it. It was interesting. It definitely was a little spooky, but there was a couple of variations from the story that were kind of getting on my nerves, but I do want to go back and finish watching that because it's interesting, like, seeing this brought to life. But yes, I was a little bit worried. I will say that I don't do asylum stories well, or mental health when it's displayed. Like, I like mental health stories that are like positive. What mainly, I just don't like reading about asylums or mental health in this time period because people were treated so badly. But it wasn't done in a way I was able to handle it in here. So that's just a note. If that's something that bothers you, I feel like it wasn't too difficult in here for me. So yeah, there's that. But yes, I don't know, I may have more thoughts later, but yes, I could go on and on about this. I loved it. It was so good. And I buddy read this, I forgot to mention, I buddy read this with Kelly from Kelly Reads a Lot and Courtney from Courtney Reads. We were, actually Courtney I think DNF'd it for now. She said she may come back to it later, but she was just struggling with it right now. But me and Courtney both did finish it, and really, Courtney really enjoyed it as well. So it was fun getting to discuss it with her, and we yeah, we liked it. We enjoyed it. Then I finished reading my nonfiction for the month. I mentioned earlier this year that I want to read a nonfiction each month. So my nonfiction for the month was The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis. I finished it. I'm very proud of myself that I stuck with my goal. C.S. Lewis, so I've read Mere Christianity a long time ago. I've read a couple of other books by him. One was about the Psalms, maybe? Or Miracles, maybe. I don't remember. I've read a couple of his books. It's been a while since I've read one of his nonfiction, though. I've read, been reading Narnia, but this felt very philosophical. There were some very good lines in this that I highlighted and underlined, and I feel like, I don't know, as I read more Lewis, I'm not sure, I'll have to see, but I wonder if Lewis's writing for me is going to be, at times, like, he has really good lines that I love, but then a lot of it is just very dense. Like, this was very dense. I almost DNF'd it, but I was like, try to just keep pushing through. And there was, like, I need to reread it eventually because there were parts that just went completely over my head. I feel like some of the parts he just got so philosophical, and I was having a hard time following his point of view, like his thought process and what he was trying to say. So yeah, there were times I was like, I don't understand what he's trying to say, but it was like I said, it was very philosophical, not less theological. But there were some lines. Let me see. I would like to see some of the quotes in here that I did highlight and enjoyed. I gave this 3.5 stars, like I said, just because it was more philosophical, and that's not really something that I am particularly interested in. But okay, this quote: "We want, in fact, not so much a father in heaven as a grandfather in heaven, a senile benevolence who, as they say, liked to see young people enjoying themselves, and whose plan for the universe was simply that it might be truly said at the end of each day, a good time was had by all." Kind of getting into the concept of goodness and what it means to be good, and how God be good when also there's pain, and saying we kind of like, a lot of times we want God to make us happy, but we don't realize that happiness isn't the end goal. So he's saying that if God is love, he is by definition something more than mere kindness. So the fact that God loves us means there's going to be pain in our life, and there's going to be things that we're going to be frustrated when things don't go our way, and when pain comes, because loving someone a lot of times involves pain. Like loving your child might involve pain for your child when things don't go their way, but the situation couldn't go the way they wanted it to, because it wouldn't have been for their well-being. "We have all we want" is a terrible saying when all does not include God. We find God an interruption. As St. Augustine says somewhere, God wants to give us something, but cannot because our hands are full. There's nowhere for him to put it. He's talking about in that how everyone has noticed how hard it is to turn our thoughts to God when everything is going well with us. This part was beautiful to me too. It says, "If God were proud, he would hardly have us on such terms. But he is not proud. He stoops to conquer. And he will have us even though we have shown that we prefer everything else to him and come to him because there is nothing better now to be had." It's talking about how so often we turn to God as a last resort, and we try everything else and then turn to God, and how if God were prideful, then God wouldn't still call us, but he calls us despite that. Knowing that we choose other things over him so often, he still calls us and wants us even when we want everything else before him. That was just really, so there's a lot of lines in this that really did strike me as like, wow, that food for thought. A merciful man aims at his neighbor's good, and so does God's will, and so does God's will, consciously cooperating with the simple good. A cruel man oppresses his neighbor, and so does simple evil, but in doing such evil he is used by God without his own knowledge or consent to produce the complex good, so that the first man serves God as a son and the second as a tool. For you will certainly carry out God's purpose however you act, but it makes a difference to you whether you serve like Judas or like John. The whole system is, so to speak, calculated for the clash between good men and bad men, and the good fruits of fortitude, patience, pity, and forgiveness for which the cruel man is permitted to be cruel, presuppose that the good man ordinarily continues to seek simple good. We will be used by God, whether we make bad choices that and like Judas did, and he uses those choices to fulfill his purpose, or whether we make good decisions and follow God, he will use us. So, yeah, there you go, guys. Like I said, some fabulous lines, food for thought. There were a lot of parts that were very deep. I read The Lost Library by Melissa Koslin. I just was in the mood to pick up something a little bit different. I had been reading a lot of historical, and I decided I wanted to try this one. And so I love Melissa Koslin's writing. I have read, I read year before last, I think, A Dangerous Beauty, and it was amazing. That book was one of my favorites of that year, like absolutely amazing. One of my all-time favorite books, really. And I just love her writing. I love her pacing. I love her characters. I love how she's able to really keep my attention and grip my attention with her writing. Like, I want to read it, and I don't want to stop reading. Like, I want to just keep reading. She writes that very well, like that author. She's that author type. So this is an indie published book that she came out with last year, and I went into it not really knowing a lot about it. And initially, I was really enjoying it. And I will say again, I love her characters. Like, this book, I loved the characters. I just like her male characters. I don't know how to explain. I just really like her characters. But this ended up being a 3.5 star read for me. It just fell kind of flat for me. And it was more so me, because I know other people that love this book that gave it 5 stars. I think it was a me thing as far as the plot. I did not like how this ended up turning into kind of a treasure hunt, national treasure type adventure. So there's this mythological, not necessarily mythological, but there's this rumored lost library, and if you Google it, I Googled it, and it actually exists. Like, there's actually like this real rumor that there was this lost library of, was it Alexander the Great, maybe? Someone years ago, that it disappeared over time. So there's this rumor that it's actually hidden away. And anyway, there's this woman who's working she's working at this company, and I'm trying to remember all the details. She's working for this company, and her boss is like very reclusive, brooding. They call him the Beast. This is kind of like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's kind of like that. I wouldn't say it's a retelling. I'd say it's got those vibes. Anyway, so she works for him, but she has some secrets from her past, and she's kind of trying to run from her past. And someone starts trying to pursue her and like hunt her down. And so anyway, her and her boss end up in this situation together, running from the people that are trying to hunt her down. And this all goes into the story of this lost library, and it's kind of ends up being that, like a treasure hunt type situation. He is very much closed off, former military. Something happened overseas that really changed him, and so he has his own issues and scars. I felt like it became almost, I don't want to say fantasy. It don't have fantasy elements, but almost like fantastical. I don't know what the word would be. Sort of speculative, or I don't know. It just has that National Treasure vibes, like they're hunting for this lost library, and it just felt not realistic to the point that I didn't like that aspect. It involves Biltmore House, which was interesting, and seeing like Biltmore House, Black Mountain discussed. Yeah, I don't know. That part I did not like. So, love the characters, main 2 characters. I would have loved this as a different story, I think is my biggest thing. I would have loved it with a different plot and a different storyline. I'm just not into that hidden treasure when it's done in a way that's just not realistic, I guess. I don't know. Because it was like this whole group of people that's searching for this treasure. And another thing that I didn't like is I felt like the faith elements in it. So it's kind of interesting because her last book I read was traditionally published, and there was really not much faith in it at all. I would have loved to see more faith in that one. It dealt with human trafficking, so I feel like it would have been amazing to have more faith in that book. And I even said in my review that I wished I would have loved to seen that. This one had a lot of faith, but I didn't like the way it was done particularly. I felt like it was, I hate saying this, but kind of cheesy. And I don't mean that, I hate to say it that way, but it just felt very easy. Like, one of the people in the book there was an atheist in the book, and she talks to them about her faith, and they quickly become a Christian. And it's like everything, like, oh, I didn't know that. Everything clicks into place for them, like, immediately. And that part to me was not, I didn't like that. Like, I don't feel like that's believable at all. I don't feel like it's that, I don't know if that makes sense. just that was part of the elements that I didn't like. I love faith content in books. If it's done well, I love it. I want more faith content in books, but I don't like when it's done in a way that they're like, oh, you know, they tell them about it and immediately they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I believe now, and instantly they're changed. That was those aspects I didn't care for. So again, a me thing, but yeah. I hated to give it a low review because I love her books so much. I hope she has some more traditionally published books. Like, I would love to see her back writing traditionally published stuff. For me, this one just was not. Like I said, I love the characters, but the storyline itself was just not for me. Then I read the matrimonial. I can't say this. Every time I try to say this, I think about Miriam. On one of her videos, she said when she says this, she says it in her head like the matrimonial advertisement, like in a British accent. So when I try to say it, that's how I hear it. The matrimonial advertisement is how I would say it in my accent. This was really good. Mimi Matthews writes books that are so readable. I can read her books very quickly. This is set in the 1850s. It's a series following these 4 young men who were orphans together, and this first one follows Justin. Justin has decided that he needs a wife, or not necessarily Justin, but someone that worked for him, his advisor type guy, someone that's advising him on his affairs, like, you need a wife. So they do an advertisement and responds, and so someone else deals with one of his friends deals with the whole situation for him on his behalf. So he doesn't even meet the woman until, he don't initially meet her. His friend screens the replies and decides that this woman would be good for Justin. Justin is brooding. He lives in this manor off the coast of, is it Devon? And it's secluded. It's like nobody really travels to it very much because it's so secluded. It kind of made me think about, I'm pretty sure in Wuthering Heights, that's how the house there is. It's kind of hard to get to. It made me think about that. But anyway, secluded. So they quickly agree to a marriage of convenience. Like, she's like, yes, she's obviously, he's like, there's something going on. She's trying to escape from something, so he's a little bit leery at first, but he trusts his friend. He's like, I know my friend has investigated her, and he wouldn't put me in a situation that's foolhardy. So again, this book, I did not realize when I was reading The Woman in White that the author actually took things from The Woman in White, inspiration from that, and from mental health issues during that time to write this book. But as I started reading it and got into it, I was like, I know that she had to draw inspiration from The Woman in White. And then I got to the note and she talked about that. And because there's a character in here named Mr. Glide, and there's a character in The Woman in White named Mr. Glide. They're not in the same role, but they're both not the most likable characters. I'll just say that, as not to give anything away. So there was that element that she explored in here of women being put into asylums wrongfully committed. Discussions of like the mental health injustice in that day. So that is an aspect in this. Again, if you don't like reading about mental health stuff, that's in here. Overall, I feel like it was done in a way that it really wasn't like a big trigger for me, but that is something in here. Content wise, this is considered clean fiction. There is some language in it, mild language throughout it. I just really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars. It's like a 4 to 4.5 for me. Really easy to read. I love this time period. I have the next one ready. I'm hoping to read the next one this month. And y'all, I feel like this video is gonna be so long because I read so many good books this month. I should have done this video earlier before I finished so many books, but I'm trying to wrap this up quickly. Also, my kids and I finally finished The Little House on the Prairie, the 3rd book in the Little House series. We've been reading that one slowly. We really had not read a lot since they started school, but we were able to finish it up. I've been trying to get more, over the past few weeks, trying to read more to them at night. It was a struggle for a while just with trying to get into routines and stuff when we started my new job, and they started school. But we've been reading a little bit more. We've actually started book 4, Little on the Banks of Plum Creek, and I'm enjoying that one, like, because I have not read that one since I was a child, and the last one I had already read recently, but this one I'm really enjoying because I haven't read it since I was a child, so it's quite new and entertaining. Last 2 books we're going to talk about, and y'all, both of these again were 5-star reads, so I'm gonna try not to get too long-winded. But The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhone, y'all, that book was so good. I've seen so many recommendations for this, so many people talking about it, and so we were supposed to get some snowy weather, and so I was like, I went to the library, and I had actually looked this book up, and they did not have it, so they were all checked out because my library was doing a book club. That was the book they picked for that month to read, so all the books were checked out. Well, I happened to find, I went to the library, was looking around, and I had checked out some books, and right on my way out, I saw this on the shelf. They were showing that it was their book club pick, and it was actually from another library, not my local library. They had, like, requested others from different counties so they would have enough. So I checked it out. I was like, oh, yes, and I checked it out, and I had that one and A Winter by the Sea by Julie Klaasen, both wintery books. Read both of them and loved both of them. So Frozen River, this is why I wrote in my review, this is why I love Booktube, because I would never have picked this book up if I hadn't heard so much about it on Booktube and Bookstagram. But I kept reading about it and hearing about it, and I was like, I want to read this because I kept hearing about it. And so I decided to give it a try, and I really loved it. I found this author's writing style to be similar to Amy Harmon, in my opinion. I felt like I was reading an Amy Harmon book at times. This is a very difficult and painful read. If violence and hard things like that trigger you, then this is definitely very painful. I didn't find it triggering personally, but I have not dealt with a lot of the issues that these characters have dealt with. So it deals with rape, a lot of conversations about rape, but let's get into what it's about. So it's actually based on the life of Martha Ballard, which was a true midwife in Maine in the 1700s. So I love the setting. I loved the time period, early American history. It was fascinating. It was written from her point of view, and then at times there would be like journal entries in it, and it was just fascinating. I loved seeing her accounts of the midwifery, because midwifery is something that I have been fascinated with since I was in nursing school, and really even now, like, I would love to go back to school to be a midwife, a nurse midwife. Here in North Carolina, you have to be, you have to have a master's degree to be a nurse midwife. You can't practice midwifery without a nursing master's degree here in North Carolina. So if I ever went back, I would have to go for quite a while to get a master's degree. But that's always been something that I've thought I would love to do. So midwifery just fascinates me anyway. So that's one reason I wanted to pick this up. And so those aspects, we see her, going around the community, delivering babies. That was fascinating. Martha was such a strong woman. Really delightful character. When I say delightful, I mean like strong, and I enjoyed her character. Very strong woman. I loved the details in the relationship between her and her husband, Ephraim. It was a beautiful relationship. We get a few flashbacks, not a lot, but a few, to some things that happened, and to their marriage, and to like the early days of their marriage. Their marriage was beautiful. He was so tender and gentle and loving toward her, and there's just some things between them, some things that he did for her were so beautiful, and I just loved their story so much. That was really just a rock solid foundation in the book. When there were so many other painful things going on, their story was beautiful. Like, you could look at their story as being just a beautiful story in the middle of all this other tragedy. Main storyline here is that there is this woman who has accused two men of breaking into her house and raping her, and this follows that journey of Martha being the one who that woman confided in, and Martha ending up having to testify at the inquest, and just all of that throughout the story, that storyline, seeing what happened. Like I said, this book does have heavy content. It deals with rape. It deals with that woman discussing her rape, and there's some kind of semi-detailed, more detailed things discussed at one of the court sessions, and it also mentions other rapes, other women that have been raped. So it's a frequent part of the story. There's violence, there's beating, there's a man murdered. That's another aspect of the story. I completely missed that one. But yeah, that's a big main aspect of the story as well, is that it opens up with this man being found dead, obviously murdered, and it's kind of, people are trying to, I think there's this suspicion that it's trying to be covered up because of what happened to, it's involved with the lady who was raped, and so there's all of these elements to the story. I just love seeing how Martha was so strong through all of this, and I loved seeing her character in all of this. I loved the time period. I loved learning more about the time period. Yeah, but again, it deals with that murder. There's some kind of graphic descriptions. I wouldn't say horribly graphic, but semi-graphic, semi-detailed descriptions of him. Other instances of violence in the story, especially towards the end. One of the things that happens with one of the characters, definitely quite graphic, but, and when I say graphic, it's not like super detailed, but there are enough details that you know what happened, and it's like, oh, okay. So yeah, there is some language throughout, mild language throughout the book, scattered throughout it. There's a couple of uses of a strong language, of a particular word that I would say, like, it's strong language. Towards the end of the book, and it involves, like, it's not, I didn't find it to be out of character. It was, the person who did this was not a likable person and very degrading person towards women, and so some of the things that they said was, it fit with the story. When I say that, I mean, it wasn't like just thrown in there for effect. It went, like, I could see it was probably would have been something that person would have said. So yeah, just those details. But there's also, like, Martha and her husband have faith, and they talk about scripture reading, and they talk about God, and there's like that aspect. It's definitely not, I would not call it a Christian novel, but there is, the characters are supposed to be Christians, and it was really good, y'all. Really, really good. I gave it 5 stars. Enjoyed the author's note at the end. She talked about how she came upon this story and like how it developed, and then I appreciated how in the very end she also talked about her husband and how much he inspired Ephraim in the story, which I thought was beautiful. Such a disparity between women and men back then, like how they were treated and stuff, and you see that in the book. But personally for me, it wasn't done in a way where I don't feel like it degraded men, especially, and I think that's why I loved seeing the relationship between her and her husband and her sons, because she had like 9 children, so she had a lot of children. But we also see like those aspects, her relationships with her adult children. I thought that was a beautiful part of the story because she doesn't degrade them as men. I didn't feel like it was like feminist in a sense of trying to degrade men. That was what I appreciated when I read that note. She talked about Ephraim and stuff. Everybody realized that she had a positive relationship in her life that she based that on. She talked about that, how she that she knew love from him, the way he had treated her, basically, like their marriage, how their marriage was, and that was just beautiful. I love this. I highly recommend it. One of my favorite books of the year. Probably going to be an all-time favorite book. It was just really good. It was definitely hard to read, but very beautiful. And then, lastly, I read A Winter by the Sea by Julie Klaasen. Y'all, this was unexpected surprise for me because I read the first one in this Sisters of Seaview series last year, and I enjoyed it. I gave it, I don't remember if I gave it 3.5 stars or 4 stars. I don't remember. But it was very, very slow for me. And I think the one thing about that book that I struggled with is there were so many different points of view. Like, she follows, I think, 3 of the sisters' points of view in that book, which was just a bit much for me. It was really hard to connect with any of the characters very well. In that book, one of the sisters ends up developing a relationship and getting married with someone. Their relationship, to me, it was very hard to connect with because I feel like we saw so many different sisters, so many different relationships, so many different aspects that it was hard to really connect with any one of them. There was just too much. So that was why, like all of that, it just, I like the story. I love the writing style, but I thought it was very beautiful. But I did kind of have to push myself to finish it just because I got kind of stuck and it was so much going on that I really felt like some of the characters, I did not get as much depth from the characters as I wanted. Anyway, I say all that to say that I read that, and it wasn't, so the next one in the series was not like super high on my radar. I wanted to read it, but it wasn't like, oh, I've got to read it immediately. But someone had told me that the second and third, they felt like the second was better than the first, and our Old American Spirit had talked about a while back reading it. So and then just considering that it was in winter, I was like, and I was in the mood for reading something wintry. We were getting snow, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna read this. I loved this one so much. I have now become a Julie Klaasen fan. Like, majorly want to read every single thing she's written because I loved this. It is, again, slower paced, very sweet, but there are things that happen in this one that I think made it a little more fast-paced than the last one. But at the same time, also, she does not do 3 sisters' points of view, which was so helpful. She did 2, but it was so much, it was just so helpful to only have 2. Like, 3 is just a lot, in my opinion. Whenever I read books with 3 points of view, I feel like it's a little bit of a struggle for me to really connect with some of the characters sometimes. There's a couple of books I can think of with that, but I just love this story. We follow one of the sisters, like I said, has gotten married, but we follow 2 other of the sisters. The royal family comes to Sidmouth, which was very interesting, and that brings several men to their boarding house who work for the royal family, and they're staying at the family's boarding house because these sisters and their mother all run this boarding house to help support themselves after their father died several years ago. And so we see these new characters, which I think the boarding house aspect is just really fun because in each book we get to see new people who are traveling through. And of course, some of these new characters catch some of the women's eyes. And I like these characters. Alright guys, I gotta wrap this up quickly because I have been filming so long that my iPhone storage is almost used up. So anyway, I just loved these characters. One of the sisters that we follow is Emily. We follow Emily and then another sister, and Emily is exploring writing a novel. She wants to write a novel, but she also is exploring, she was in the previous book, we have some discussions about how she was hurt by a young man, and so in this book someone else comes into her life, and then we also see some things going back to her past with this other young man, and so yeah, there's a little bit of a love triangle sort of thing, which is not usually my favorite thing, but I enjoyed it in here. It was done well. I was a little worried about who she was going to end up with, but it turned out the way I wanted it to. The other sister, we're still exploring her, and I'm wondering, like, what's going to happen with her? Is she going to get her happy ending? Her happily ever after? I'm like, going to happen, because I know there's one more book in this series, and then she's also doing a Christmas book, in this series, like a novella. So I'm wondering what's going to happen. There's a sister that is not living with the family, that has been kind of disgraced and sent away to live in Scotland. And so I think the next book is going to involve her coming home. I'm really excited to read that one. I've got it on hold at my library. But yes, I just love this book. It was just, I don't know, I just loved going to Sidmouth. I loved reading it. I loved spending time with these sisters and their mom. And I think it was just cozy and sweet. And I felt like I was right there with these young ladies, and I felt like I was watching a period drama like Pride and Prejudice or something. I loved the details. This one just kept me much more interested than the last one. Yeah, so very much enjoyed it. But anyway, I was going to talk about some of the things that I'm currently reading, but I don't have time, guys. This video has been so long. I will try my next reading wrap up to film before I read so much again. I meant to film this earlier, and life has been busy. I feel like February went crazy. Like, February hit and it was off the charts busy. But anyway, hopefully my next one will not be this long. But yeah, I have read some amazing books, y'all. Amazing books. January has been great. Off to a great start. So let me know what y'all have been reading. What was your favorite book you read in January? I would love to know. Talk to you later. Bye.